Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SB Patrons video today that I'm making for Jacob Good as part of the custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, I am feeling very unwell right now, and we have ourselves a track from an act named Daughters titled City Song. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Apparently, according to Jacob, the song is horrifying. It's not a song, it's a soundscape of a terror so visceral that it induces some kind of panic mental state. While the lyrics can be interpreted as a lot of distress, I see it specifically as an actual war zone, and bombs falling into a cityscape and people trying to run for their lives as the war continues around them. It's hard to listen, it's terrible, and it's visceral. And we're going to listen through it from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go, City Song. Get the art up on the screen off of the You Won't Get What You Want album from Daughters 2018. What are we in for, eh? Ladies and gents. The pulse is diabolical. Gunshots. I mean, it's horrifying, isn't it, really?
Cities and empty glass. Words to nothing. No one sleeps. Cities and empty glass. Cities and empty glass. Graciousness is lost. The betrayed yearn. Cities and empty glass.
I mean, it's just the fridging going between the first and the flat second, isn't it?
Shops are closed. There is nothing. The city is an empty glass. The city is an empty glass. Billows shriek. Everything weeps. City is an empty glass.
Are the rhythms on those little taps on the side? I mean, there's just those calling bits where they call out are just, I mean, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be sort of like pausing within this. It's just a lot. It's like heavily distorted dubstep synths. And there's a musicality to it, but super dub.
Air shrieks. The breath's long. And the fires are out. The water sits still.
I mean, it's probably one of the more unique pieces I think I've ever reviewed. City Song by Daughters. We're going to talk about it more in conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Daughters, titled City Song, off of the You Won't Get What You Want album, released in 2018. The opening track off of this. What do I think the song is about? It does sound like a war zone. You know, if you look at the lyrics to it, the city is an empty glass, words do nothing, no one sleeps, just people never getting to sleep, people never feeling rest. Shops are closed, there is nothing, the buildings shriek, everything weeps. It's just horrific sadness. And I feel like part of that is exemplified through like the instrument tones there, the crying out the dude there, almost the kind of hypnotic mantra of the air, and the air shrieks, the breath is long and the fires are out, the water is still. Quadrants that I think reflect the various sectors of this environment particularly well in a way that is incredibly awful. And just to think about that, you know. But I also want to sort of like measure the cadence that I take with it. While I've heard objectively more terrifying and sort of like intense music than this, there was something about this that was just done so classily at the same time. I feel like they found a way to make this musical at the same time as invoking the feeling of dread and heaviness there, the chaotic discourse of the tones and textures, that rhythmically a lot of it made sense, so you can kind of follow along with it to an extent in a way that things were nicely rounded and metered even when things went down and you just had the vocalist on their own. I think part of what makes this work so well is that the person that is the vocalist in this is sitting there in the middle and basically speaking about the environment sparsely, not overcomplicating it, but it's enough as a listener to be able to gather what's going on and to appreciate the intensity of what's going on there. I think that's very powerful music because we didn't try to sing it. There were spoken parts, there were some yells and crying out in the background there, and it was very much like someone was almost being tortured. How they were sort of like had trauma, PTSD after everything that occurred there at the end when everything stopped. And I think that was the best way to approach this. I don't think you could have made this catchy. Obviously, I don't think you could have made it into anything more than an experience with what they've presented there in totality. So I feel that it's very effective. In terms of the structure of the piece, it's 5 minutes 55, and I think there's enough variety compositionally to be able to keep us going throughout. I think the way that we sing, the way we speak and communicate makes sense with the lyrics, and you just have to provide the foundation instrumentally or the atmosphere through the tones, textures, and timbres and the noises in order to make it work. I think part of what made this track so well is that there was this constant kind of unending kind of like discomfort caused by the dum 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 dum, like the march of the war drums, you know. Occasionally you had snares that sounded like gunshots. And like if it wasn't pulsating, writhing around, it was just held notes with distortion and grit and bit crushing, and it was feral. And it was very much not trying to, like there was a moment where the kind of synths went up and down, they kind of fluctuated with arpeggios, and that was just almost kind of seductive because you're like, oh wow, are we going to get a somewhat even pleasurable sound next? Are we going to go into a nicer part? No, it gets more and more intense. You have that brief oasis and then you go back into the mire. And like there are parts where the synths just completely go out. And this is structural sort of like the discussion as well as a talk about the extra instrumental parts there, because it's more about how things were used as to rather like the chords or the melodies that we played. But I think that the way that we handle things in terms of the like da-da-da-da, that kind of march there, like machine guns there, the silence caused by that and things building back up again after. Because one of the things that was so amazing about this track was the use of dynamic range. Things just stopped. Like when the vocals came in near the end and they were by themselves, it was like you'd had all this intensity up until that point, and then it was nothing. It was so striking, I think, because of that contrast. And it's like there's little bits of static and radio hum and everything like that, and all these different sounds that kind of add to kind of imagining what could be a war zone, which I appreciate. And it's just, as if I haven't said it before, I think this is a very different type of experimental music that I feel is completely important in this day and age. I don't think you could have done that in a more traditional contemporary way. And I think ultimately, I'm basically explaining what's occurred as opposed to why it works. But part of why it works is the fact that it symbolizes certain things that could happen, like machine guns or gunshots, or like radios or sirens or anything like that. Part of it is simply that it exists, it completely removes itself for the person to be left alone without all the destruction occurring around them. Those are effective by those alone. A relative minor with occasional Phrygian flat seconds going between those root notes is menacing by itself. I think the kind of dubstep, kind of wow kind of sense you have with the ferocious kind of like coloring and dustiness and the kind of glitchiness of them is like a system that's malfunctioning. And I just think that the fact that it constantly goes backwards and forwards and drowns out the vocals and certain elements alongside other things is indicative that the noise is bigger than the human being, and we're simply just animals trying to fight our way through it or to last. And you just get more of that as you go through, and it just grows and grows and crescendos until the end where there's nothing. I just think it's incredibly wonderful. Part of reviewing versus reaction content, reaction is basically reacting and going, wow, that was a thing, and reviewing is explaining why it worked. I feel like I've done that, but I also think this is probably some of the purest art that I can think of, because it is just so textured and styled to the concept. But again, it needed to be that way. I maintain that. I think even if you tried to do this with like some of the harder genres of music, like sort of like the harder kind of like more experimental avant-garde electronic stuff, or if you tried to do it with like metal, for example, it would have been about the guitars, bass, and drums, etc. in that situation, as opposed to like what it was trying to implement or affect. So ultimately, I think instrumentally, texturally, phenomenal. Thematically, it was more about the story I was trying to tell in the various stages of it. It starts small with like an occasional gunshot, just goes into more and more until it gets to the close. And the journey you take with this is phenomenal. Absolutely no complaints about it. Incredible piece of music. And if this is what the album is like, I'm in two minds about it. One of the reasons I'm in two minds is because it's very heavy music in a way where you listen to it, and even though again I feel like I've just listened to enough heavy stuff that I have empathy for it, but I don't get kind of destroyed by it. I think an entire album of this with this context, I think this is more, if I'm not mistaken, of a concept album as opposed to like a variety box with lots of different stories with different vibes. Amazing stuff. The studio production, recording, mixing, and mastering is top tier, commercial grade. The vocals were not overproduced. They kind of had this interesting kind of like mid-range resonance radio filter to them that I thought was effective. It's kind of sounded like you're on a phone call with someone, like they were calling out for help. With the crying out sounding more sort of like less filtered and more you're in the room hearing someone getting tortured. And I think, the drums alongside that, they weren't trying to mix them super duper cleanly. I think it was more about the way they made you feel. So they were dynamic, they were dramatic. You'd have some parts where the vocals were getting overwhelmed, for example, and other parts would just be nothing. It's very much like you follow along and pay heed. And again, I don't think you could have mixed and mastered this like a typical kind of like track across a wide variety of more sort of like mainstream genres, even some of the more kind of heavier ones, just because I think that you need things to kind of writhe and seethe in there, and I think they managed to do that here. They explored the stereo field as well as the frequency spectrum really well. Any resonances were deliberate. It's nice that without pumping to the bus compression limiting was handled. And ultimately, it's just a really stellar song, and I'm thankful to have heard it. So thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named Daughters, titled City Song, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SB Patrons video. Spiderhands out.